Greetings, nerds. This is SNN Nerd. I'm your host, Sarah Belmont, and with me, as always, is our Mr. Producer, Will Polk. How are you doing today, Will?
Doing very well, Sarah. How are you doing this weekend?
We're just talking about when we can go and see Endgame again.
Yeah,
And it appears that many people are going to see it again because it just continues to crush the box office.
yeah. I think this afternoon saw that it passed Titanic for number 2 on the all-time grossing spot.
Yeah, and that means it crossed the 2 billion line within like 2 weeks.
Yeah,
Less than 2 weeks,
less than 2
technically.
weeks. Yeah, less than 2 weeks. Yeah,
So it's insane. And I hope it beats Avatar. I don't know if it can sustain that, but I fingers crossed, because Avatar being number 1 is just a disgrace.
it is. It is a disgrace, but I saw a tweet today. Someone had put up the scene of Captain America and Falcon whenever on your left. And so it had Avatar as Falcon, and it had Captain America as Endgame, and it was like the tag was James Cameron looking over his shoulder.
That's a good one.
Yeah,
I wish I had seen that, because
yeah,
that seems perfect.
yeah. On your
But
left.
yeah, I'm just, like I said, I hope it sustains it. And speaking of sustaining momentum, we're going to talk about Cloak and Dagger season 2, episode 6 tonight. This season is just, I think that they pulled off a better second season than the first season. I know it's not over, and I may be calling it too early, but every episode I just watch and I'm fully engaged. Like, I'm not even thinking about, like, well, obviously this will happen next. Like, I'm just engrossed in what's going on, and it keeps leaving me like, wait, what just happened? Oh
Yeah,
my God,
yeah,
that they just went there.
yeah. You're totally right. This season has surpassed its inaugural season, and it's even even when they have like an off episode, and I don't even know I want to say that this was an off episode, but it's still so much better than a lot of things that's on right now. And they really have had some good sustained storytelling. I mean, we're at episode 6 of a 10 episode season, and it feels that everything about it is just they're really hitting on all cylinders. And you're right. When I'm watching it, it's like, okay, fully engrossed, and really have to watch. Sometimes I have to go back and watch a second time to make sure I like saw everything I thought I saw, because there's just so many things that happens in the episode.
I had to pull up notes from previous episodes to kind of like connect the dots onto what was really going on. Like, and I don't know if this is true, but Despair is another Loa.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
I believe so. Yeah.
And it's crazy. Like last week when we spoke briefly about episode 5, I referred to it as a magic trick. Well, they fooled me again, because I was watching this episode, and as I knew, I had seen things on Twitter that talked about Despair, but it really, like, all of that was pushed out the window when I started watching the episode. And then when they do the reveal, I'm like, no. So you're telling me last week when they were talking about the farmer and it's on the tip of my tongue what the animal is.
The viper serpent.
Yeah, really, it was the guy. It wasn't Leah who was
Yeah,
the viper in that
yeah,
situation.
yeah. It was, and I've seen some people say they thought that reveal was predictable or whatever, but if Prisoner of the Moment, when I watched it, I surprised. It was one of those things, and that it was like, whoa, this is how you reveal a big bad. uh,
Absolutely.
because Despair was one of those villains that I don't want to go back to another show, but there's a show that we sometimes talk about on this podcast that goes back to a certain season 1 where you have a certain villain who, I'll just say it, Thawne.
Oh, that show.
That show, yeah, that hasn't been able to recapture that moment. But with Despair, I just love the way structurally they set this episode up as far as each record that he pulls up. It's just that breaking down of Tandy. So, and because even though Tandy has a lot of bluster and a lot of energy and everything else, she still has a lot of insecurities, and especially with relationships with people, and particularly men. And Ty's really the only person that she's been able to build that connection due to obviously the incident and from where they first got their powers, but also as we've seen their relationship grow throughout the 1.5 seasons that the show's been on. I mean, that's been the one constant person that has not let her down, despite they have their falling out moments and everything else. So I like the way that they use the records and the dream sequence to sort of reinforce that relationship and remind us as an audience, these two, and we've talked about this before, they really can't work independent of each other. They need each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying, because what I thought it was so beautiful how you start off and you start playing Perfect Family or The Perfect Life, and then the B side of it is the Fractured Family, which reinforces, like, those can just be mini segments in and of itself. And what they reinforce is that her parents and what happened with their marriage is not, they could still be together and she would still have issues of losing people. Like, nothing's perfect. And even if her dad did die in the accident, and instead of becoming a thief, she were to live up to his legacy, she would still encounter problems. And then I liked how you kind of knew what her, I don't know, different interpretations would be. And the surprise factor was how they integrated Tyrone and his path, or his brother, into those flashbacks. Yeah. And then they pull out Liam, which don't tell me anybody saw that coming, because that's BS. That is a callback, like a really far one.
Yeah. Cleaned up Liam, no less.
Right. Well, of course. I mean, of course he had to be cleaned up, because if Tandy's life changed, then his life probably had ramifications. Like this show is really indicating, like, we are all connected to each other, and yes, we all have our problems and our failures and our successes, but we're all butterflies. And so one change in one life can have ramifications for other lives that they're connected to.
Definitely. And that's another thing too, is, even though this episode focused on Tandy and a lot of her journey and her feelings of, as Andre said, stealing other people's hopes, as what we saw sometimes in season 1, it also, I felt Tyrone also had a very important arc in this episode, and I didn't feel like he was sidelined or displaced.
Yeah.
At all.
He serves such a critical role. Before we move on to talk about Tyrone, do you think part of what's happening, this connection between Despair and Tandy, like, I don't want to gloss over what she did last season, because there was a full episode where she was stealing the hopes, and we learned that that's basically what Despair is also doing. Like, he needs that to survive. So is this a form of penance for her?
It could be a form of penance. It also could be a situation where, to date, we've only, at least for the night that Ty and Tandy received their powers, we've only known about their situation. I think this penance or this him having the need to feed off of her stealing people's hopes is kind of a penance. Like, okay, yeah, you need this to I need this to survive as far as despair. And maybe it's like that, I guess, where she and Ty are, yin and yang of one another. This other despair and hopelessness is the third factor that is not necessarily the counterbalance for the two of them, but more of a
reflection.
Reflection, yeah. I'm just trying. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it until you asked me about it here, but I think that's what it is.
Yeah, well, don't forget there was that line early on in the season where Tyrone was starting to understand who and what Mayhem was, and he asked Tandy straight up, "Am I like her?"
Oh, yeah, that's right.
There's similarities between those two and what they're doing and the lines that they choose to cross versus the lines that they choose not to.
Yeah, that's true. And it seems that so with that you saying that, it seems that despair is that line because his powers are kind of similar to Ty in that it feeds off of fear and hopelessness. Maybe that's that. If despair is that next level, where if Ty crossed the line, that's where he would go.
Yeah, and I mean, you could say the same with Tandy as well. I forgot, like Tyrone feeds off of people's fears. Even though that creates the monster, and in a way that's exactly, but Tandy also feeds off of people's hopes too. So,
right. But there's that line. But you're right there. As you rightly pointed out, when Ty asked the question, "Am I like becoming like the negative part of Bridget and Mayhem?" And I think since Ty and Tandy have that bond, that connection to each other, they sort of keep other in check.
Oh, absolutely. Divine pairing.
Exactly.
Like, there's balances. All of these Loas that we've met have always been one person, one entity. So there is no balance. There is no counterbalance to outweigh what they are doing.
Yeah. So Tandy and Ty could never get to that point, that we're seeing with Mayhem and what we're seeing with Andre, that despair, because they're there to check one another when they get to that place.
Yeah. You wanted to go into about, and talk about Tyrone's role in this episode.
Yeah. So, even though this was the B-sides and the journey we saw it through the gaze of Tandy, there were also things that happened here that, again, if circumstance or whatever broke another way, Ty's life would have turned out differently. But also, it was, it wasn't, I guess it was Tandy's representation of Ty in her memory. So it was, but I think in that representation in her memory, it does sort of reflect the reality of the character. So when we see them in Perfect Life, him as a police officer, that protection role, serve and protect. So that's what she basically envisions, and that's what that she sees Ty as to her. And so, and then when they get further along and they're all alone and they're both thieves, they, again, even though they were breaking the law and doing whatever what was necessary in that particular situation, again, it continues to go back to, basically he's the cloak, and he is that arm of protection around her, so that no matter what happens, he is there to protect her. And ultimately, we saw that in the conclusion of this episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We got to figure out what this place is, because you've been referring it to a dream or a memory or subconscious, and I don't know. I feel like she still is, when they induced her, she still found herself back into that other dimension that is embedded in Tyrone's cloak. Because the records were there when she went down the rabbit hole with Mayhem a few episodes ago, and she found herself there. And I'm starting to wonder, because Mayhem got stuck in there.
Yeah.
We encountered another Loa, which I can't remember the name of, but he is the crossroads person. Mm-hmm. And now Despair is hanging out there as well. So I wonder if this is sort of what Tyrone has the ability to do is bridge these two worlds.
It could be some kind of pocket dimension where basically that's where their powers are generated from.
Thank you. That is what I was looking for, because I've done a little bit of research on these characters, but like a year ago, and I believe that's what they called it. There's a pocket dimension where he basically can put people into. However, I think the showrunner is doing their own twist on incorporating the voodoo and the Loas into it, which is beautiful, and I love it.
Yeah. I think obviously that's what they're doing, but since they're, instead of basing the show in New York, it's in New Orleans. So yeah, they're definitely using the local culture and flavor to build into the mythos of the show, which again, that's another thing I just really appreciate about this series, is even how organic it feels with the fractured family, when even just a simple thing as far as going into the Gulf of Mexico, having Ty and Tandy meet on the platform, and with Mina, and I don't want to say about. I mean, I do want to follow up more on the pocket dimension thing that you're talking about, but all those elements really helped with the grounding of this show, and yeah, so that helps, and I think getting back to the pocket dimension. That makes sense why Tandy was able to go back to that place that she saw whenever they were doing the drug-induced blackout.
Right.
Because that, and I guess since Despair is also able to tap into that dimension, he was able to conjure up these visions, or he might also have I guess, for lack of a better word, through line to it as well. So he was able to just like take the construct that's already been kind of placed, and then use these records as a way to, break Tandy.
Yeah. We don't know, and I hope we figure it out and what it is, but more importantly, who else is there, It's just, it opens up such a doorway of fun, and why I really like this right now, and I'm really enjoying it, is because I keep thinking about those other shows that we watch and we talk about, and I haven't been a fan of. I'll be honest, I haven't seen both of the episodes of Arrow and Flash that aired this week. I saw on Twitter some of the comments, and I was like, yeah, how about not? But what the showrunner and the writing team have been able to do is take the powers, like, you steal hopes and you steal fear of other people, and been able to create this other way to tell these stories that are so enriched in being a parable, of being a story you hear when you like go to church or something, like whatever your beliefs are. And that's what I think is so fascinating about the way they're choosing to use their powers and their growth in telling this coming of age story about these two very different but also very similar people and the world around them. And I think that's so clever that I just can't get over it, because this is a superhero show, yet you don't see them running around in costumes. You don't see them like I'm sorry. It takes me out of it now when I see Arrow running around the streets of Star City without a mask on. I'm just like, why even put on the gear?
Yeah.
Why even go? Like, you're a deputy. Like, I don't understand it now. Why? What makes the difference? And in juxtaposed to this, which what you're saying, what talking about before, it feels real. It feels grounded, even though there is these moments of the supernatural.
Yeah. Yeah. It really, yeah. And I guess that's why it's so refreshing. So why I'm really enjoying this show. Because you still have the tropes, you still have the things that happen, but it's just just a very mature and a very grounded way of telling these stories. And so, yeah, you can have pocket dimensions and all that kind of stuff, but then whenever you base it, what Andre's doing and with the trafficking of these young women and everything, it's just like, wow, it's just, here's how a negative villain superhero can abuse these powers to really harm people, and in a very real kind of way.
Yeah, I mean, he runs a women's shelter.
Yes, and that's what's so insidious about it. I mean, a place, and I guess that's why this really speaks to me as far as why the show's really captured my attention, is a place where, people do go for refuge and for assistance and help from a very hopeless situation, and this entity is like feeding off that and then using it to further abuse them. I mean, that's just like, I mean, it easily, it's a very depressing story when you think about it. But
Oh yeah.
But at the same time, it doesn't take you out of, I mean, I'm engaged in the sense that I just want to see how Ty and Tandy are going to like break down this. And this episode was one of those ones where it's just like, oh hell, this is definitely like probably the darkest part of the season, because Tandy is off the grid now. She's been removed from the chess match because
she gave up her hope.
She gave up her hope, and how he manipulated her. And it's a great way of storytelling too, to again, put a real world's problem, but then bring it into this universe of Cloak and Dagger, how her one last measure of hope in Ty was just taken from her, in the episode. And I love how they set and the reason why it works in this episode is because they set it up earlier in the season when he was shot at and he absorbed those bullets when he busted the ring. Yep.
I just remember watching it, and I accepted it. They fooled me. Okay. I don't know. For some reason, whatever reason, yesterday when I was watching it, I was just like, stupid Tyrone, you could have gotten out of the way. I don't understand why you just let him shoot you to death. And they fooled me. I was just like, I was waiting, but I was also just so engaged that all of my logic and disbelief was kind of just shut down for the moment, because I was fully engrossed into just watching the story and let it play out rather than trying to guess like, oh, well, they could do this. And to go back to your point, like, it really worked. This is another magic trick, because the writing is so strong that you're not trying to find plot holes. You're not trying to outthink what they want to do with the plot. Instead, you're just like, no, I want to just watch it and see everything and then reflect on it.
Yeah, definitely. And it's just a good play as a viewer. That's what I'm looking for in a show.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, yes, we could definitely pick out some flaws and quibble about certain things, but you know, yeah, you know, at this point, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to sound like, you know, the local radio homer when they're analyzing the calling the football game or whatever. But I mean, I kind of can't help it. I mean, this show is just it's a really strong season, and you know, there's a time and place for that.
A few more things
Yeah.
that I noticed in this episode.
Yeah.
So we learn about Andre's story of how he basically became despair and he killed himself, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yep. You know, we have another character who attempted suicide before. Tandy.
Andy.
Last season.
That's right. He talked to, yeah, and that was that the parallels.
Yeah.
Because he did go back out into the bay and he threw himself. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing is we already talked about the shelter. You could say Tandy, very similar, where yes, it wasn't like she created a men's shelter or anything, but she did manipulate a lot of men last season.
She did.
To steal things from them, especially the rich boys.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a lot of selfishness, a lot of parallels between these two characters.
It is.
The song that kept playing, and on every record, it was brought up, I believe, at least once in very subtle ways. The lyric that I really heard them say again and again and again, there is a land that is fairer than far. What is that?
Ooh. Oh gosh, that's a very powerful line, and there's a land that is fairer than far. I'm gonna have to think about that one.
Yeah, me too. And listeners, let us know if you can make out what they're referring to, why it just came reoccurring, because there is something there that the writers are either hinting at, in regards to that, because I felt like there's a reason why we heard that time and time again.
And it could, I don't know if I mean, one thought it could be that it's, again, that reflection of the two of them, Tandy and Ty, being that bond, that that goodness, energy that is, you know, sort of running through from last season into this season, that despair and mayhem, at least, I guess, are the negative energies and stuff, and that by them overcoming all this and breaking this ring and bringing back hope to New Orleans, maybe that's the land that, as we go through this deep, far journey of what we're watching with Tandy and her loss of hope, could be, you know, that restoration of it. And maybe that's at the end of the season, that's where we'll end up.
Maybe that's more of an end of the series at the rate that they're going with the development of these characters.
Yeah.
The final thing, unfortunately, this is the line that really stuck out to me the most in this episode, but how many people does Bowen's baby have to hurt?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, talk about legacies that you don't want. I think she feels a lot of that, and this is why this character is so jaded about people, about good things, is that all she's ever known is people who are supposed to be good, supposed to be kind, supposed to love her. They're not good people in the end.
They're not, except for Ty.
Except for Ty, yeah.
Except for Ty, yeah. Yeah. That's definitely another powerful line. And it, I mean, this episode, it really was a deep dive into Tandy's psyche, but despite all her, um, stealing people's hope and things and her insecurities and whatnot. Um, again, I said it before, I'll say it again. I mean, the thing that, stands out to me is just her fundamental belief that ties that goodness that keeps her balanced.
Yep. I agree. And now we're going to see Tandy without Tyrone.
Mm-hmm.
And Tyrone trying to find Tandy.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe this episode this episode 7 will be his journey, as we, we learn more about him and how he copes without her being there to sort of be that voice of reason, because he gets way into the weeds, into himself, and she's always there to snap him out of it.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll see this week. We're also going to talk about Doom Patrol, another episode. They're headed to the finish line. Yeah. Only a few more episodes left.
Yeah, I think 3 left after this. Yeah.
Yep. And we left off with the Bureau of Normalcy capturing Cyborg, and it's just a classic Prison Break episode.
Yeah. Totally.
What stood out to you during this episode?
I think what stood out to me, it was a lot of callbacks to things earlier in the season, and also a sister show of Titans. So I think the thing that stood out to me as far as the Titans tie-in, it reminds me a lot of the episode where Dick was in the asylum at the end.
Yeah.
And in particular with Cyborg and the constant reboots that Grid. Well, he removed Grid from his mainframe, but still there's some residual nanites or whatever tech that was going on there that was causing these reboots, and reliving the moment of the accident and his very tortured relationship with his father, and so that's what stood out to me. Also, I like how they've grown Larry's character, Larry Traynor.
Mm-hmm.
And, even though he didn't want to go back to the ant farm, ultimately he realized that we're going to have to do this. And so, so it was good to see that progression from, especially from, Francis Patrol and some of the earlier other episodes. I just, just seeing the steady progression of growth with each one of these characters in this series. Rita, same way. Cliff is just, I love Cliff. Yeah. I mean, you can just count on him to just bring, Cliff and Jane are like the two, when you need a moment of where you just need to just laugh out loud, they can always depend on one of the two of them to provide it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just the growth of Larry that you see, but there's a moment in this episode where they debate whether or not they should go save Vic, because this is Cyborg. He's friends with Batman and Superman. Why would he need their help?
Yeah.
But they are the only people. And I really liked how for a while now there's been this tension between the original people in that house and Vic, who just came out of nowhere and is starting to take over and become lead. And he wants a team. I guess he didn't fit in the Justice League. We don't know really what happened there, but he's now becoming more a part of them. I mean, that line that stood out to me was he's becoming more machine.
Yeah.
And I just wish, well, I know why they didn't add this. It wouldn't have made sense, but in my mind, I was like, and less of a hero. And that's really what we're seeing. Like, the more machine he becomes, the more he becomes this odd creature type being that isn't really on that superhero level anymore, because superheroes are who they are because they retain that sense of humanity.
They retain that sense of humanity, but also that sense of invincibility.
Yeah.
And Vic, and that was the other thing that, as far as things that stood out to me, was that tension there, and why it makes sense for, whenever we first started the series, we all wonder, why are they bringing in, how does Cyborg fit into this? Because, we are so used to him in the mode of Titans, or here recently with the DCEU, being fully with Justice League, but now from the things you just said, it's making sense for why he was the one that they brought over into the Doom Patrol.
Yeah, it allows these other characters who we haven't been shown through that lens to have a hero moment, to actually literally save a superhero.
Yeah.
Like that's their time to, like, no, I am important. And Cliff is just a brain in a robot. He's not smart brain.
You're just scrap.
It's like that. So, and then he tries to talk himself. He tries to talk them out of it, and it's like, no, you don't understand, Cliff. You really are not special. A microwave is, or no, a toaster is more special than you.
You are.
And I'll be honest, again, another episode where I don't know what happened to me yesterday. I just was watching shows and I was like not thinking logically. I knew Rita was missing, but I also did not know if she just decided to stay back. And I definitely wasn't like, oh, well, clearly Cliff ate her.
Yeah.
Because Rita would sign up for that.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point. And I think I guess we were like on the same kind of wavelength as far as watching shows, because I had the same kind of thing where I was just really just sitting back and enjoying this for what it is. And I think that's just a good reminder to me and to sometimes just do that. You don't have to always watch show in a critical eye, but just sit back and just really enjoy it. Maybe it's the residual effect of Endgame. I don't know. But,
maybe. I don't know what it is either. And I think it's hard to turn off the critical eye when all you see are the mistakes or how it could be better. And then go to a show where you're just like, this is just fun. And there probably are some, but for whatever reason, I just want to watch it and take it for what it is and not try to make it something that it's not.
Yeah. But yeah, that's very true. And that was definitely the case with me and Rita. I guess when I was watching, I was trying to figure out, not so much in a critical way, but, what was the deal with Rita? Why wasn't she, wasn't a part, when we see them going down the elevator, which is a very funny moment too. It's just when Silas and they get into the elevator to go down to the ant farm, and they're getting jostled around, and just very nausea-inducing moment.
I jumped ahead. I couldn't do it. I seriously did. I was like, let me skip forward. Oh no, we're still doing this. Let me skip forward again.
Yeah. It was very, not for weeks. Take some Dramamine, folks, if you need to before watching it. But, I was like, where's Rita? But then when she did come out of Cliff and just all the prim and proper Rita, even though she's when she's in Elastigirl forms, a very grotesque looking, being. But she still has that air of prim and properness and Hollywood starlet, and, yelling at Cliff about, it's disgusting in there. And Cliff's like, hey, I had a rat crawling around inside of me. I mean, that was just a good funny banter moment between the two characters. But this episode, one of the things that I guess also stood out for me was the callbacks just to Silas and also Cliff's conversations earlier in the season as far as the fatherhood thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it didn't, it was completely consistent with Silas to basically trade the Doom Patrol for Vic.
Yeah.
And so, for it, that didn't, that was again one of those things where I was like, yeah, that makes total sense. And that's why I'm like, why are you guys like trusting this guy? Because even when they had the whole discussion about whether or not we should call Vic's father or not to do it, I mean, they were, Rita was like, no, we can't do that. Because she knew that was just a bad idea. But of course, at the end of the day, they did and made this deal with him. And of course, it turned out exactly how we thought it would, which would be him flipping and turning them over to get Vic back. So, that was one of those moments where I was like, okay, yeah, let's see how the rest of you get out of this.
Right. And I agree. Like, it works so well because they've been laying out the setup for that to occur, and for us to believe that, yeah, of course he would sell out them for his son. It's his son. And they already have a fractured relationship, but still, I mean, why would you protect those who you barely know and allow your son to just remain captured?
Right. Especially since he knows what the ant form's capable of, since he worked there and with Star Labs. So, which was a nice little connection to the larger universe.
Absolutely. Yep. I completely agree. That conversation when they're talking about the plan, like, you keep referring to the callbacks in it. I just like how you realize what a journey they've been on as a group of people. And so, and it's funny because yes, they all still have their own personal secrets, but now some of the members are learning, like, only Jane and Rita knew that he took out his whatchamacallit?
Grid.
His grid. Yeah. And Cliff was just like very annoyed. You didn't share this with anybody, but you know, and you could see some guilt, but it's like, it really is. I mean, and that's what happens with families. You have your personal secrets, and then somebody finds out about it, and then it erupts, and suddenly your parents are just like, and you didn't tell us?
Yeah.
So, I like how this episode, yes, it's a prison break. We've seen a lot of these episodes come before it, but I think it's very important in terms of the season to showcase how far these characters as a hero, as people who look out for one another, like, they're not saving just citizens, but they're looking out for another, how far they've come. And that's why you have them look around and be like, well, we got Vic.
Right.
But what about everyone else?
Right.
Like, these are our people too, and then they release the butts.
Oh, yeah, that's a total, yeah. The absurdity.
That's what happened.
Yeah, literally there's asses running around the ant farm.
Okay. Like that use of language, they did not refer to them as that, but yes.
Yes.
Who will bite you?
Who will bite you? Yeah. And that's a total Doom Patrol, like, I was like, the absurdity of it, but, we have Danny the Street, so, and total, like, and we have, it's completely consistent with this series, but it was just seeing that, and the Bureau of Normalcy, also formerly known as the Oddities, getting devoured by these butts. And
I like how the general, like, finds out that information and then kills himself.
Yeah.
It's like, best of luck with you. I don't.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're just afraid of a little butt? Like, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah.
And that's juxtaposed with a bigger emotional breaking point for Cyborg.
Yeah.
So he did kill his dad.
If he didn't, he beat him till it's just a matter of time before he succumbs to his injuries. Because I mean, it was the fury
Mm-hmm.
and raw emotion that was unleashed in that moment. I mean, I was like, damn. Yeah, that was pretty. I mean, you did have, I mean, you had the odd, like I said, the craziness and absurdity with the butts, but then you had that moment with the very serious moment there with Vic and Silas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Mr. Nobody is not my favorite villain of any show. I haven't been that, I'll admit, and this may be scandalous, but Alan Tudyk in this role, for some reason, is just not working for me. However, with this episode, along with Doom Therapy or Therapy Patrol,
Yeah.
I love the way they're having this character pull these strings to get what he wants.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like there is something so spectacular about the manipulation that is occurring and him just being the puppeteer for all of these characters. And we don't know what that end goal is, but he is being pretty masterful as the puppeteer.
Very masterful. And I think the end game we saw with, was it Therapy Patrol, or which episode was it where the original Doom Patrol, where they were just all broken? They weren't able to overcome their flaws and fears, and
it was like a patrol, Doom Patrol.
Yeah.
It was really weird, the phrasing of that title.
Yeah, it was really, I can't remember the title of it, but I think that's part of his end game, is to try to break these individuals, and one by one, in their own way, they're sort of overcoming it. And even though they aren't all, quote unquote normal or 100%, they're accepting who they are, warts and all. And so for him to, obviously, this moment that has been building between Vic and Silas, I will freely admit I didn't see it coming, manifesting itself in this way, but it's for nobody to cause Vic to do that. And looks like Silas is dead. If he's not, he's very close. Yeah, that's just to see how Cyborg recovers from that will be very interesting as we finish out this season.
Yeah, I mean, it has a good emotional beat to play out for the next few episodes because they are approaching that finish line. I still think it's a misstep to have 15 episodes. Even though I'm enjoying it, I still think that it probably, looking back on it, I'll say, yeah, you could have cut this episode and that episode.
There was like around episodes 4 through 6, there were some that we could have probably compressed into one.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that weird episode that happened a few weeks ago that I'm like, we're not talking about Doom Patrol because I am so.
Yeah. Yeah. The chief and the cave woman, that was a bit much.
Yeah. That was not needed. There was so many things, but you can't be perfect these days with this season. I mean, especially when you have 15 episodes.
Right.
That's what Cloak and Dagger is proving because they only have 10.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I am excited to see the finish line and also see a setup, hopefully, for season 2.
Yeah, and I'm really hoping that because with Titans, DC was just super quick to say, oh, we're going to go ahead and do season 2, and as of yet, we haven't gotten any word about any kind of renewal with season 2, and then of course there was the cutting short of Swamp Thing in the middle of production and wrapping it up. So I really, but I don't think that was a ratings thing or whatever, obviously, because the show hasn't even been on yet. It seemed like there was some creative issues that were going on behind the scenes that caused them to do that. But I'm really hoping that Doom Patrol gets a second season because this is just a fun, unique show that really takes a lot of the tropes that we are so used to and turn them on their heads. And, I've gotten invested in these characters, and I want to continue to see their story go forward.
Agreed. I think Endgame is still killing the box office and probably made another 100 million while we were talking.
Probably so. Yeah. So I guess now the question is, when will it cross 2.7 before the weekend, or will we be next Sunday afternoon saying, "Hey, it's made $3 billion, y'all"?
Yeah. Oh man, that will be insane. That's like $1 billion a week of release. Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah.
That's it for us today, folks. Will, why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you?
Yes, you can find me at Will M. Polk. That's WILLMPOLK.
And you can find me at SJ Belmont, SJBELMONT. Please follow our crew on Twitter at CNN Nerd. Friend us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram. But most importantly, rate, subscribe, and comment on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, and Spotify. Good night, Geek Out. You're welcome.